Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the London International Animation Festival. This is our third live stream. You've just been watching, hopefully, the international competition program number 4, which is called Being Human. And we have 3 guests. We did only have 2 up to about a second ago, but our third guest has just popped up magically.
Sorry about that. I made it.
Well done, Bernardo. Okay, well, Bernardo has just hopped in. This is Bernardo Britto. Bernardo's film Hudson Geese was playing in this program. We also have John C Kelley, whose film was A Family That Still Dogs. And we also have Patrick Smith, whose film Beyond No was also screening in the festival. And alongside me, there is also Malcolm Turner, my co-festival director. So, okay, well, I've got a question, one for each of you first, and then I think Malcolm's probably got a few questions as well. But I'll start with you, John. So, your film, I felt it's quite a profoundly sad film. It's like a meditation on death and grief, and the sadness is that feeling of being estranged from your family. I just wondered whether it was a true story. And of course, you don't have to answer that if you don't want to, but it felt like a true story, but I wondered whether it actually was.
Yeah, I'd say a majority of it is a true story. It's actually screening as a documentary sometimes. So a majority of it is true. Yeah, I like to think of it as a bummer for sure. It's an absolute bummer.
Has your family or members of your family seen that film?
No, they have not seen it. I'm gonna see how long I can string that out.
Are they curious to see it? Do they know you made it?
They have not heard of it. No, they don't know about it yet. I don't know how I'm going to have that conversation. That'll be fun.
The title is going to be a little bit of a hint, regardless of when it goes live online. The title is surely. It's
true. It's true. Yeah. And some travel restrictions are going to make this a lot easier on me for the holidays. I think for sure.
So did your family really steal that many dogs?
Yeah, that's my suspicion. Yeah, I think in the film I say I suspect that my brother took 9 dogs and a cat. I still think that I believe my sister is responsible for several as well, but I haven't confirmed any of these kidnappings. But it's absolutely true. It's a strange thing that brings us all together. It's canine theft.
And it's your voice in the film doing the narration.
Yes.
Did you always choose that it would be your voice, or did you think at any stage you might have an actor or someone else to do the voice? Because I feel that voice is it works really well because it really draws you into the story.
Oh, well, thank you. I did consider it a little bit, just in trying to make it as good as possible. And, when you're listening to your own voice over and over, it's a humbling experience, and you think someone could do this really quickly and much better than I am doing it right now. But ultimately it felt like, my own sort of message, and it felt authentic to do it myself. And it kept everything in-house, just doing the whole thing alone felt right.
So did you record the narration first and then animated to it?
It all came in patches. A lot of the original audio recorded at this cabin where these windows were opening was recorded 2 years prior to finishing, and then the story was written over the course of about a year, and then I had little sketches here and there. So it all kind of came up together. There were a lot of different pieces of audio that I was excited about that I knew were going to be somewhere in the film, but not sure where. And so it kind of all came up together.
Okay. And Patrick, so you've made 4 films now in a similar style, similar as in stop motion. And they all use real objects, although I'm not sure if are they photographs or are they actual real objects? I mean, to put it into context, you made Board Shop, which I've got a few notes here, but Board Shop used 1,254 skateboards, 1,011 surfboards, and 875 snowboards. Then you made Gun Shop, which had 2,328 firearms. Then Candy Shop, which had 2,863 pharmaceutical drugs. And now you've made Beyond No, which has 3,475 masks from all over the world. So are these all real objects, or have you used photographs?
It's kind of a hybrid. Predominantly, it's all real objects that I collected myself, most shot with my phone at museums and stores. I mean, each film has a little bit of a different method, but for example, my gun film was predominantly filmed in local gun shops here in New York, as well as the National Firearms Museum in Washington, D.C., which has thousands of guns. So in that way, yeah, but each image, has to be cleaned up and arranged according to music. And then the last film, the film that you're screening here, Beyond No, the mask film, was definitely the most challenging, just in terms of finding and locating the masks I wanted to create the narrative. So that was, I would say, almost 100% ones I shot. But near the end of the film, I realized I was maybe 800 masks short. So I put a public, you probably remember on Facebook, I actually asked people to photograph their own mask collections. Since you're one of my Facebook friends, you probably saw it. And I gave them photography instructions on the angle I need and everything like that. And I got a really overwhelming response with that, which was very interesting how many people collect masks. I had no idea, so, and that put me over the edge, and I was able to finish the film.
You must work incredibly fast. I mean, am I right in thinking those 4 films have all been made in the last just over 2 years?
Well, 3 years, because the first film, the first 2 films I did at the same time, Gun Shop and Candy Shop,
right,
together. And Board Shop was done very quickly. And then masks, actually, Beyond No took a substantial amount of time, about 1.5 years, to mostly to collect the masks, mostly to take the photographs and the actual animation part probably only took a few months.
And it's quite a change of style. Well, a very dramatic change of style to your previous short films, which were all, I suppose you could say they're more traditional, classical type of animation, drawn animation. I mean, what caused, or what made you decide to make the first one and, just to branch off and do this?
Well, yeah, as you say, it was quite a pivot. All my films have been traditionally hand-drawn. It happened around the time of my parents' death. I found the importance of objects, as most of us who've dealt with a dying parent realizes. You're just inundated with objects all of a sudden, meaningful objects too. And so it started there, like my father's guns, my mom's pills, around. So it started there. And then I really, I've been studying this technique for a very long time. I've always been a huge fan of Paul Bush's. Maybe before that, Spunkmeyer did a wonderful film, the Historia Nature. And then there's been several other animators over the past several years that have used this technique in a real effective way. And I've always studied how they did it, and I've always wanted to play around with it. So I guess it was just time, it was time for me to do it. And what I didn't realize is how much it would take over my studio and my interests, and how much you can do with an object, and what you can do if you put two objects next to each other, and it changes the meaning of the objects when they're juxtaposed with each other. And I've, it's been a really great experience for me.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in there before, while I'm thinking about it. But when we played Candy Shop, and when I first saw it and selected it and stuff, I love the impact, but I at a certain point, particularly when I saw it actually screened in the cinema, my mind went to just purely the logistics of wrangling all of that stuff, and my question is, when you went out and got together, the 3,000 pearls and all those guns and all, like, was that just an act of perseverance and just getting all the stuff together, or did you actually kind of find yourself involved in sort of subcultures or groups of specialists, or groups of people that had all this stuff in common? Did you learn?
Yeah, that's Malcolm, that's such a great question, because this was very unexpected for me. This is another thing that is inherent with objects, is when you're photographing objects, you inevitably learn about them, and it's an education in itself. Particularly with the mask film, with Beyond No, is I got this immense education about all these cultures and uses of masks, and it was astounding. It's just overwhelming. And with the pill film as well, you learn a lot about pharmaceuticals. I'll even go back to the gun film. One of the biggest surprises is meeting these people that have these guns. I had certain expectations on what type of people they were, and I learned. I was very surprised and relieved, actually, that some of my expectations weren't true. And so it's been a real, in that way, it really, instead of being an animator just sitting in front of the drawing table, it was being an animator out there and really shuffling around, take photos. It was a great change, and is a very interesting experience.
Bernardo, hi, welcome to LIAF. Your film is, on the one hand, it's sort of a deceptively simple film. I think it's very beautifully drawn and animated. It's quite humorous in a way. It's got a sort of dry, laconic narrative voiceover told from the point of view of a goose. But then it has that really sort of surprise ending, or surprise bit in the middle, which just gives it a whole other layer of meaning. I wondered whether, could you imagine this film being made in any other way other than animation? Because I can't personally, but wondered what you think animation, why you chose to make this film, and what you think animation brings to a film like yours.
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, thanks for programming the movie, and sorry again that I was late by a little bit. Also, both of the other movies sound so great. I am just listening to you guys talk about it. I'm like, wow, these sound like, it's just very funny to hear little teases about, yes, your movie is about your family stealing animals, or, hearing about Beyond No and all the masks and stuff. These all sound great. I wish I could be there and watch all of these movies together in a theater.
Sure.
With Hudson Geese, I think there is something about the simplicity of the design of the geese, of the animation, where you are able to have full control over it and draw something that is both, endearing, but also a little bit, there's something comical about how a goose looks and just the way they honk and the way they move. And I think Herzog has that quote about how, if you look into the eyes of a chicken, you'll see just how stupid they are and how there's nothing there. And I think animation allows you to create, an animal that has those human characteristics that I think they do. I think part of what was so interesting to me about doing the movie was I got to do some, small just research. First, I had the idea of it and the sort of thought, and then I did some research on geese, and you read things like they mate for life. And when you read things like that, they immediately become very human to me, at least. And so it was about that. It was about trying to create a design that felt simple enough and felt like you're looking at the silliness of a goose, but also that had the kind of warmth and empathy that you can empathize with these animals that are pretty different. And then I would not know how to make geese likable with live action.
And the same thing, same sort of question I asked John, that is that your voice in the film?
That is my voice. It was interesting listening to John answer that, because I feel like I feel very similarly about it. And I've done it for other movies as well. I've done both, where I wrote it and did the voiceover myself, and then others where I cast other actors. And usually I'll do the temp voiceover myself, regardless of if I'm working with an actor later or not. And it's oftentimes it's improved by the actor, but there's always like a thing of, you're letting someone else do something that was written specifically for your voice. And like you talked about the voiceover, I think maybe use the word laconic, boring, monotone, matter of factly. Those are all very apt words to use. And it's a fine line of getting that delivery that I want, where like, yes, this is about this goose, and there's not that much emotion in the delivery, but to still try to have an undercurrent of emotion so that the audience does feel something. And I think I am a better writer than I am a director, and I don't know if I've quite gotten it to the point where I can get someone to deliver the rhythm and the tone that I want. And again, it is that full end-to-end control that I think as animators we're like, oh, I can control all of this and that very specific rhythm. Can I ask John a question? Is that all right? Is that allowed?
Of course, yeah, jump in.
Have you had an experience, John, where you had to work with an actor and you were replacing voiceover that you'd done, or how was it different, I guess, directing an actor?
Yeah, I think you actually put it really well. It's difficult when something is written with your own voice in mind. And I talk a little bit in the film about my voice and making a really big effort when I was a little bit younger to get rid of my Southern accent, my drawl. And when I was going about that bit of dialogue, I thought, well, I better do it because you can hear it, like it's buried a little, but it's still very much there. But hearing other people read it, I agree also that there's certainly something they can bring to it, but it just felt like it was entering into a zone of, I don't know, pretending on some level. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you're introducing some artifice into something that is just you trying to connect with an audience, and now you're introducing this person that has to pretend to be what you are trying to tell.
Exactly.
Yeah, look, I think you guys have hit on something there, and it goes to a question I was going to ask later, but I'll ask now. And I've been watching this particular program called Being Human, and I have kind of mixed feelings about themes and all the rest of it, but Being Human is always kind of one of the more interesting programs in LIAF, and NAG's style of program goes to kind of the laconic, goes to the let's take an idea and go one or two steps further, and animation is the perfect platform for that. The first comment I made is, Bernardo, when I watched your film, it made me look at John's film differently. I started when I watched your film, Bernardo, I went back to John's film and I was like, so what about the dogs? Like how do they feel? And what about the people? On the assumption that all these dogs weren't just out and out strays. What about the people that had a dog and don't have a dog? The dog's just gone. So my question to all of you, and it's something that each of you will see in a different way. And Patrick, your film brings out, I think, so many issues about how humans interact with masks and how they use masks and how masks speak for us and hide things and all this. So my question is, all of your films are in this program called Being Human. What do you think, what comment, if any, would you make about what your film says to that topic? And if that's too high a question, what is it you would like an average audience member to take away from watching a film? Maybe I'll just go like left to right on my screen, start with John on that.
Sure. I was glad to qualify under Being Human. I thought, oh, good. I haven't lost that touch yet. Yeah, I mean, I think that I was excited to see what it was programmed under, because I do think at the core of it, while it's a really personal story and a really bizarre one, I think it still does kind of get at this sort of essential feeling of when something is there and then something stops being there, and you start imagining it being there. And I felt like that, you know, I don't know, in doing all of these, there's this question or all of my films so far anyway, there's a question of, does this have a bridge from me to the audience, or is this better to be singing in the shower, kind of for myself and alone? But this one did seem to have that sort of way of, I don't know, sharing sort of an experience of loss with others, and maybe shame too. The more kind of like, I don't know, things that we have that are embarrassing about us that we hide maybe, but don't always have to. Sometimes you do, because stealing dogs is illegal. But but you know, there's this sort of like uniting sort of community acceptance, I think, of the fact that we all have these things that we hide.
Yeah, but there's also kind of a human heartbreak, potential human heartbreak to the whole story of stealing dogs. Not to mention, if you know, animation can take an animal and give it human qualities. I mean, you haven't really done that in your film in the way that, say, Bernardo's done it in his with the kids. But I've had dogs. Dogs are going to miss an environment, you know, in a certain sense. And
yeah,
you know, there's another dimension hiding behind that, I think. Yeah,
I've wondered a lot about the dogs. It only occurred to me as an adult that these dogs were all stolen, in fact. But one thing about the film that I thought was important was to keep it from being about my family and maintain that it was about my experience with my family. Because I found that there might be some issues in trying to speak for other people, including, you know, the animals in this case. Who knows where they all are now, you know, rest in peace. But yeah, so I just wanted to maintain this sort of like personal voice to make sure that I wasn't stepping on too many toes and telling that kind of a story.
Sure. And Patrick, your films have gone from being, you know, really quite clear representations of humans, obvious humans doing things and experiencing things, to these more, not abstract in the, you know, in the non-representational sense, but, you know, they don't have the clear linear structure, linear narrative structure that some of your earlier films did. And Masks is such a, you can walk round and round talking about the connection between humanness and masks. And I was just wondering if there's any part of that commentary in your film and the way you deal with all those masks.
Well, absolutely. You know, I think, you know, when I first started making Beyond No, it was simply photographing the masks in my own collection, and also our travels through Japan, photographing masks from wood carvers, which, you know, I'm a huge fan of the No Theater in Japan. And at that point, it was this very focused project. I didn't really have a direction yet. And then when I started, you know, photographing, I expanded, you know, geographically at first, and then by subject matter. And I quickly realized that I was looking at the history of humanity through masks, and it was an overwhelming experience, because you're literally looking at every single culture in every single time, and there really isn't there is a mask for every topic. There's a mask for every ceremony there, and it really it's like I said, it's overwhelming. And I saw it as, it's impossible to study masks and not have this overwhelming love for humanity. You know, you just creatures that have created these nutty masks throughout the ages, you know, starting from the beginning. You know, there's 9,000-year-old mask that is in an Israeli museum. And it's just, we've been doing this from the very beginning. We continue to do it. And there's a thread that goes through all of them. And I think that's where I went to create the narrative. And a lot of them, you know, a lot of them are fun. A lot of them are serious. A lot of them are ceremonial or functional. You know, there was a section that I the pandemic was starting. So there's this little section of N95 masks that I photographed specifically for that purpose. Yeah. So yes. So it's a pleasure to be in the program titled the way it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And Bernardo, one of the things I forgot to mention earlier is I know somebody who worked on creating a CG reproduction of those geese getting sucked into that engine for a TV program that was about the crash, and the way you did it is much more compelling and much more engaging, and I think more realistic than the 3D.
I don't know how realistic it really is, but
well, I can imagine that the mayhem. I think, you know, that moment of mayhem and the impact. I've got some questions about structure that I'll ask if I get the time, but it's the same question to you. It's about that transference of humanness into these, you know, incredibly sentient creatures, and you've done some things like, you know, the lead goose has a wife who has a name, for example. You know, these are very human attributes you're pinning to these, and I wondered if you wanted to speak about the humanness of your characters and what you would want an audience to take away in regards to that.
Yeah, I think, you know, when we speak of, that sounded so formal. When we talk about being human, I think there's something interesting about that, because there is the, you know, scientific definition of what a human is, and people and but there's also certain connotations that come with what it means to be a human and to have these things, and that, you know, just by saying that and separating it, you know, as a thing that is specifically for humans, we take it away from everyone else, and there is a hierarchy of how we look at the world, where we situate ourselves at the center of it. And you know, everyone talks about now how everything is so polarized and all of that. And I think part of the goal with this movie was to try to disorient you to think about things from a different perspective, and to think about the ways that we treat each other, you know, through a view of how we treat the planet and how we treat animals. And you know, the sort of first drafts of the script and of the idea were a lot about how climate change had disrupted the migration of the geese and things like that, which didn't ever fully make sense in a story, where it made sense to lean more into the human and the sort of relatable, and to personify them as kind of actual people that we could care about. And you know, it is like I said, geese mate for life. So, you know, of course he's going to have a wife, and you know, of course he's going to have a name, and I don't think too much about it, other than trying to write it authentically to how I would feel if I was in that situation, and to try to realize that this sounds really very kind of like new age or something, which is not necessarily my intention, but I think there is something about what we prioritize as humans and what we think it means to be, you know, the most developed species on the planet, or whatever people say about humans. And I think there are animals that are, this sounds so weird, but I'm saying it anyway. There are animals that are very evolved and advanced in ways that are different than humans, and live lives in a natural harmony with the environment in ways that humans don't really. And I think the idea that humans, you know, evolved from slugs to chimps to whatever, to become, you know, what every other animal wants to be, is a very strange way of looking at the world. And I guess it was trying to reorient it so that geese are living their own lives, kind of, and instead of looking at them as this is kind of a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's an interesting thing. The way they test airplane engines is they'll throw goose carcasses into the engines to make sure that the engines still run. So they're factoring it in that they will kill these geese, and it's about how do we kill these geese without hurting the engines. And I think that's an interesting thing, where it was never a consideration of like, should we rethink this so that we're not destroying these animals that have been flying these paths forever? It's like, no, how do we make the engines stronger? And you know, I'm not the most animal rights person in the world, but I do, there's something about the purity of an animal, and I think there is something about being more humble as humans. I think if anything, it's that. It's being more humble as humans in terms of how we relate to the rest of the planet, but also in terms of how we relate to each other.
Yeah, you're talking to somebody who's actually hit a bird in flight, but I think it's a sobering experience. But so was the, at least in my reading of it, was the fact that the humans, the actual humans that appear in this, seem to be kind of really underplayed. They seem to be very simple apparitions, like, or even down to the film crew, you know, the people that made that dreadful film about
I don't mind the movie. I think the movie's okay.
Oh, it's
not great, but it's fine.
It's not a fair representation of how air crash inquiries go, I tell you that. But they seem really underplayed, and really, you know, they seem the simpler of the two species sets, if you like. So
yeah, I think part of that is trying to show their sort of disinterest in the lives of the geese, right? It's like the geese are barely mentioned in the movie or in the book that Kelley wrote, and all of that. But yeah, it's also from the point of view of the geese. These are just sort of one-note creatures who do what they do. Yeah,
great.
We are actually rapidly running out of time. I just wondered quickly, Malcolm, if you had one last question for either all or anyone on the panel.
Oh, look, I do, but if we're out of time, that's fine. Like, you know, we could do this till we can do this till midnight. But if we're running out of time, that's totally cool. I do know Patrick's got to go, and I just wondered about the inclusion of the really modern masks, the really kind of contemporary, almost pop culture masks in the film. I was wondering where that kind of decision came about.
Well, it was a pretty easy decision in Japan. When I was photographing these no masks, I constantly was bombarded by, you know, these carts that sell plastic Hello Kitty masks and all these Pokemon stuff. And it was, to me, it was a really beautiful contrast between art and time and aesthetic. And then, so that brought me on a whole nother thing. And then you walk into a Halloween store in New York City and it is just heaven. I mean, those stores are amazing, and they just have just everything you can imagine. So I just went hog wild in those stores, and I really tried. Again, that contrast between these, you know, the masks of antiquity and the modern masks, and realizing that they're not all that different, it was one of the things that I wanted to accomplish in the film. And thanks so much for having me. You guys, as you said, I got to split and teach a class.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Absolute pleasure. Well, okay. Well, I'd like to thank our guests for being here, being part of the London International Animation Festival. Hopefully one year we will be all together in the flesh on stage somewhere in a cinema. But for now, very pleased to meet you all. So again, from my screen, I'm not sure if it's on everyone's screen, but from left to right on my screen, I'd like to thank John Kelley, Patrick Smith, and Bernardo Britto for joining us here at the festival. And me and Malcolm will be back here tomorrow night with another 3 guests. And in fact, for the next 4 or 5 nights, we will be here doing some more Q&As. So thank you again, everyone, and see you all soon. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.